Welcome to Wickerson Studios. My name is Michael Wickerson, and I am going to do a very basic series on my Patreon in order to maybe call in a few new subscribers. I'll set it at the most basic setting, and these video tutorials and GitHub files will be available. What I'll also make available is this lovely plugin, which was offered to me by Ralph Schroeder from ARA Jewelers. And it's a wonderful tool that you can jump in and go to any site, including my GitHub, and hit that and jump right in. It happens to be on another screen right now, but it would jump in and it would show you basically the repositories of what's available to you and things like that. So it just has to load up a little bit, and I should have a beautiful picture of myself there. And then there is a bunch of other information on there as well. If you were to scan through here, you could see all the other offerings, especially the YouTube channel, which offers tons of free videos and tutorials. But this one's going to be basic, and I'm just going to start and try and keep these 5-10 minutes long. And I've done this a few times in my life, but it's always interesting to go back and see what happens. So I'm going to shrink this off so it kind of disappears off the side of the page. I probably will take that to disable because we don't need to see that. It's still there, which is interesting, maybe because I had it set to true. Now that's interesting. I haven't tried that yet. Let's go back into here and enable it and just get rid of it. There we go. And then we'll set it to disable. All right, so that's something new because it ran the script. And everything else I'm going to cover today, I may cover something similar to this, but let's take it and put it on disable to start. And we'll just start slowly with it. And your Grasshopper will probably be closed. So I'm just going to close that down, and you're probably going to go into Rhino and start Rhino. It's going to look something like this. It's not going to have these colors and this fixings, but that's kind of what I like as a setup. And what I'm doing there is I'm going into File Properties and going into Appearance and basically playing around with the colors. And I'm just in here playing with altering that colors, and then in the end, it's a little bit off the page. But once I'm happy with what I want, you'll see down here I do that. Now, if I restore the defaults, you'd be back to where you were. So let's do that and get you prepared. Now, I have my screen set the way I kind of like it, and it is set to the defaults in. So if I went back to Tools, Tool Layout, and grabbed in here toolbars, I think you'd find there'd be a basic setup default to what you might want to do. I've saved a few of my files under what I like as a default. If I put it back into the default, you'd see exactly what it's like with its standard toolbar group with 16 tools, and that's kind of what I like to begin with. So let's just go there. I could have restored the default, and I did restore the defaults, but here it is. As you open it up, you're going to be looking into this. I do have help available here, some materials for renders and layers because I use that in properties. I keep it pretty simple in here because I don't do much within the Rhino window. That said, let's just jump in there and show you exactly what I did. I went to properties. I went over to appearance. I grabbed my colors. I said on this one I'd like something a little more darker blue in the background, which makes me more feel a little better. It also is a darker screen, so I don't mind watching it longer. And there we go. I like to set this to perspective. I like to start my Grasshopper with this little launch button, but you won't have that if you've just started out on Rhino 5, 6, or 7. You will open a window, and when I start a new tab, I automatically have this set. So I'll just pull that up to the side and ignore that. Now I have two windows open, my other one and this one, and I'll probably start with this one. So let's just pretend we're starting in that document blank. Also, what I have here is why I did this was if I bring in something like an object, like this orange object, I can set my defaults here by right-clicking on here in the Grasshopper window, going to Preferences, and right now I can set, let's say I wanted my default to be a little brighter orange or a little brighter yellow. That's kind of like you haven't selected me yet, even though I am very happy with the orange. And the blue, I've already got set to the blue I like. If I'm in selection mode, I can see what color I like that. So you can go here and you can slide this around and change that color as well. I like that blue, and I have my default set to that. So you can go in and change the color in the Rhino window. You can change the color here. I'm not going to start with a sphere. I'm actually going to go in and show you exactly what I did initially. I went in and I grabbed a series of items, and maybe instead of just kind of walking through what's happening here, I'll kind of build it again and show you what was happening. There is a little dot here on the page, which is kind of confusing me because everything's like nothing's up here. I have it all set to disable, so there's no reason for there to be a sphere reading here, but it might be coming somewhat with the script. I can't tell you why that's there. It won't be there for yours. So if we started, if we started a new doc, you would have this little blurb that wants to pop up. It wouldn't be there in yours, but you'd start with a blank screen. You should be good at navigating in Rhino. You should be using it Control and Shift to get around. Grasshopper's first of all going to give you something very simple, point containers. These hexagon areas will show you all the wonderful, these ones are listed as the ones that come up, but there's many more within it. And the ones I use regularly are a point container. And that's if I'm grabbing something out of the Rhino window. So if I put a point in here and then I went to this point container and hit set one point, this should be familiar to most people. Now I have a point that's in Rhino that I technically can get rid of. And I have a point here. And once again, something on this new, it's reset because I don't have it as a template. I'd have to go back and set my orange here. And this one I would set, because sometimes I don't like it custom so differently. I'll set that blue to here. And there we go. We've got our visuals that I can select the point and not. Now that point's totally in there, in that object, which is nice. And you can use things like curves. You can grab things like surfaces. You can grab things like reps. You can grab things like geometries. That's the mesh. You might be using a mesh. And you should have a geometry node in here, but I think it's down here and it doesn't pop up. And you can always select all these right to left and just get them in order and space them, and now you have some nice items, one of which actually has an object in it, the other ones are still empty. I would have to grab a curve and generate a curve in Rhino, then select that and hit curve, set one curve, and now it's there. And I could take this curve and I could hide that one away too with the point. Now I have two objects that are actually in my that are selected, and I can select them and do things with them, and you'll see exactly what I do with that as I move on. But these are containers, and you can also have containers for the coders in you to your Booleans, your string types, text types, your integers, and your floats. Those are going to be very popular. Right to left selection and organizing. Those are all things to put things in. Now, I don't actually. I'm just going to go down here, right click after selecting them all, hit a group, and put them over to the color red because I don't really use those. I don't really like any of those. And I'm going to take them all and hit disable because that's not how I actually build geometries in Grasshopper. What I like to do is really think about things. So if I went over to objects, I might grab a quad sphere, which is an interesting object. If you take a look at it, it's sectioned off like a inflated cube. That will give me data, allow me to start working things. I could grab a sphere, that would give me different information. And I can always get used to using this tool, draw only selected geometry. So now I only see the sphere, and now I only see the quad sphere. And that would become more apparent if I brought in something like a cylinder. And as I select that, you'll notice that cylinder, all these things have things already in them. They're functions that are running, and when you double click on them, right click on them and go to help, it doesn't tell you what it tells you in like C nodes and GHPYTHON nodes. It just tells you a little bit of information about each one. But there is something in here that's making this run. And so if I hit extract, I'll see there's a base in there. And the two things I want you to get in the sense of knowing how to use back in your params tool after you get past these containers are the number sliders and the panel tools. And that said, these two I'm going to group and put them, and actually I'm going to grab a Param Viewer right here as well. And what they are is you can take the things that are meant as inputs, plug them into the outputs, and see exactly what's reading there. And you'll see exactly that you have one, and you're going to start thinking about things as items, lists, and branches, or tree access. And you're going to think of this as one branch, one item on the end of them. And now you're starting to understand that this is a pretty cool parametric system. All these things are most common to be used. So because I use them a lot, I usually group them and take them to a color-coded green pattern. I'm just showing you this so it's not so alien to be viewing my sites. And I do have a little trouble getting in here sometimes. Grabbing that, and there's the green. So I will be using that. And when I find something I really like this, and I say, okay, I've got a pretty cool script going, I'll probably group that and go and color code that, sometimes yellow, but to a nice blue, and say, okay, I'm pretty happy with what's happening in those scripts. So let's just take that script and bring it over here and say, okay, something's going on. When I'm working a script, I usually get rid of the group because it just gets in the way. But what I'm doing is I'm extracting. And the first thing I want to show you that I use are these panels. So what did I extract? Well, I actually extracted the world XY plane. And that's going to give me something that if I double click and start typing X, it's going to come up XY plane. And there's exactly what that base value is. So if I plug that in, nothing changes. But if I went in and I double clicked and I hit YZ plane, now you're going to watch that, and it would be more apparent on the cylinder. If I plug that one in, you're going to see it rotates that. And you're going to notice something different between these quad spheres, these closed quad spheres and spheres, is this one's open. So you're going to think back to your Rhino days, do something like cap holes, plug that in, and now you've got a capped hole that you can play off the planes, and actually you can just plug in 2 by hitting shift, and now you have 2 objects. And those 2 objects are actually sitting there ready for what's called baking. And now I'm going to group them together, and they've now been baked. If I leave this window and don't look at anything in the Grasshopper window, and I go back into some form of Rhino that I understand, I've actually, let me go to my standard tool and select what I want to view. And now I can do a nice rotation of what's happened. Now, this is still an object that interfaces and goes into the other one, and I might have to at this time do a Boolean 2 objects, but I'll do a Boolean Union. And I will select these 2 objects, and I believe I just did. So if I do a select edit and open it up, you'll see that in there I've got a very interesting structure as to what happened. I believe I made that hollow all the way up to the top. So let's do a select exit and grab that poly surface. Oh, I didn't mean to grab that one. Let's grab this one up here. Select this one, poly surface, and get rid of that one. You'll see that I actually have made a pretty cool form from just parametrically modeling in Grasshopper. And this is the power of it. And I'm just trying to show some little snippets of why you don't want to work in the Rhino window, why you'd rather work in here. Because whether you like this form or not, and let's put that to visibility off, I have parametric control over this. So not only are these planes, oh, Trump's in trouble, with what's going on, I've also got the ability to put in radii, and this will bring in the number slider. What's nice about a number slider is just double click something and hit 2.0, and you're going to get a slider from 0 to 10, which is nice. So let's just leave that down. Let's take a look at our quad sphere, and let's plug that into the radius, because there was a radius in there. I'll hit Control to disconnect. You'll see that red arrow. Now, if I do the extraction, I've just pulled something out. I have my little Param Viewer here, or my panel tool here, or Param Viewer, if you want to actually think about that. What is being viewed as a param? You've got one branch with one item, which is nice because you can go to tree, double click, and go to tree structure, which will get interesting in a minute. But you have the digit 1, and that's what was put into there, and that's why it's so small. So when I put in a 4.5, all of a sudden it has to adjust to that scale, and I have parametric control of that. Now try and imagine what we did here. Now I'm going to plug this into the height and the radius of that cylinder, and now I have some pretty cool abilities to do different things on this object. So if I went back in and I hit bake and group, I've got the same bake group happening, but if I grab those 2 again, leaving the Grasshopper window, you don't have to be viewing it, sorry. You could leave that. I could go back in and do my Boolean Union again, and there, you see how that fixed up. Do my select edit, take that one off, do my select edit, and take that one off. I have this object, and then if I bring out by visible the other one that was inside, you'll see I have that object inside. And if you're familiar with a lot of Rhino tools, and I think my gumball is off, so let's just put that on. You'll see that now I can move my gumball and move it over here, and I've got 2 objects that are baked in from the same program that do the same type of things. And I have that old nasty curve I was playing with. And that point, before I get rid of it, I will go back and say, okay, what was happening on these 2? Go left to right and just select these 2 and make a preview on, actually make them enabled and preview on. You see, because I got rid of that curve, this one's actually disappeared. But watch this. Before I get rid of this point, if I go to the point and I hit internalize data, it's now not dependent on this point. I can get rid of it, and that point still operates because it knows the data that's in it, which is exactly what those other nodes were doing. And you can extract and see where that point was, and then you can update that point, and that updates this point. So just something to think about. But if I go back and I don't have that data internalized, and I get rid of clear values when internalized, just because the point's gone, that point's gone. So I'm just going to go back to here, and I'm not really working that way, but I'm going to hit disable, just get rid of them again. And let's go back and see where we are. We're playing around here. These 2 geometries at any point, you can go in and internalize that data, but because it's parametric, I'm not going to do it at this point. I'm okay with the other data, and I am going to just throw on my radius to my sphere there, and my other objects. I'm going to take everything here and hide it, and say, here's everything tucked away. And not only do you have to you can build objects in containers, there's actually incredible maths that you can bring to everything, which I hope to go through in this series. Incredible tree items, list items, and data control, and vectors. And if you can learn 90% of what's going on in the maths, the vectors, and the sets, you're going to really know how to manipulate and handle curves, surfaces, meshes, what are intersections, which you'll end up playing with, even though I do a lot of my intersections back in Rhino because I don't like to slow down my scripts in Grasshopper, or I'll write them into C math nodes. That is something we'll deal with a little bit later, is the fact that you have programming languages that actually come into here. You have transformations and you have display. The rest of this stuff is all plugins. You don't have to worry about it, but let's go to a transformation. And let's just throw on a move. Let's take the geometry of the sphere, and there you go. It automatically had, let's do the extraction. Let's say, what was that? As we move over, we'll say, what was that motion? Well, that motion is a z vector, 0, 0, and up 10, and that will be one item, one branch with one item, and that's exactly what's moved. But if I want to have more control of that, I could double-click, hit Z. There's the Z unit. Now, the Z unit has no parameter. You're back in typing in 2.0. You get another number slider, and now you have the ability to take that sphere and have control over, well, you have to collect your slider, but you have control over the move that. So now what you have is all these items, the original sphere back here, and if I'm just clicking on what I'm seeing, this is the one that's moved, that's the one that's parametric. What's very interesting here, and the power of this, is when you start dealing with lists and extra data, I'm going to take this and just hit Control Copy, and now I have, with the Shift key holding down, I actually have two spheres there. You don't see them, but you'll see them now. And you can make these parametric and play off of one another. And then your data starts to change and become very interesting. Whereas initially, while this data, if I hit disconnect, is reading as, and I always move my panels and my param viewers along, as a closed brep, a single closed brep on one branch, which is what this dark band implies by this path 0 in the curly brackets. You also have one item with one branch. If I start to bring in additional information, you'll see now I have two breps on there, and I have one branch with two items, which looks like a single branch with who knows how many items are at the end of that red. We have to go back to the Param Viewer to see the item list. But if I go into here and I actually start doing some very interesting grafting tools, flattening, grafting, and things like this, what I'm going to do is basically put every item on its own branch, as opposed to two items on one branch. You'll see what happens when I pop in the graft. Now I have one item on each branch, which means the data out of here starts to read not just as a list. And now take a look at this. Single item, single line. Two items is a double line for list, and three items is a list of lists. And now you're starting to behave with different data that can do some wonderful things and line up with the other geometries. And that's the real complexity of what's happening within Grasshopper as you go from single item to list access to graph. And you'll see we're starting to get a few more geometries in here that are pretty interesting as to what could be happening for us. If we grab the same thing and decided that we wanted multiple geometries, let's take this sphere down here and let's plug, actually let's choose something a little more awkward, the cylinder. You'll see now I've got an extra item that's popped in, so another path has been formed, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2. We have three branches, one item on each one, which happens to be the cylinder, the sphere, and the rotated cylinder, which is very interesting if you think about what's happening there. And if we pop in that other sphere with a little plug-in, you'll see we even have more. And now we're up to four items on their own place grafted. We have three closed brep and an untrimmed surface. Now without the graph tree, what I want to show you is let's copy this, slide this back down here as to where we were before. Let's remove the graft and take just the list into this item. You'll see you have one branch with four items, and you'll have without the graft, going backwards a little bit, you'll have one branch with four items on it. Now they will totally behave differently. We can get rid of this one. They'll totally behave differently as data in control patterns. Take a look at that branch. Makes a total different tree pattern than a tree pattern here. And this is things that you want to start wrapping your head around. And I'm not staying with the absolute basics. I'm staying with the fact that when you are learning Grasshopper, you have to start to read your panel tools, and you have to understand what your Param Viewer is doing, especially when you're trying to line up data and information to find out why things can loft together, why things can move and behave. So that was a little bit of an exercise. It was fun to start with, at least in my opinion. It makes you think a little different than what's going on. This interesting exercise is one worth looking at, so I will throw it into a group for people that have this file. And I will take the color scheme and go to, and try not to be so blatantly blue, I'll take the transparency back. So you can say, okay, here's what he was talking about. These are some tools to use. Here are some other ones. And then as you see, that's kind of the same playful exercise that I would encourage you to do And I'm going to take this and just do a little save doc on it. And I'm going to probably, on my desktop, I think I had a new name for what I was thinking of playing with. Let me just see if I did a date modified. Tutorials, ARA, Unity. Oh, what was I thinking? I thought I had an idea. Maybe not. No, getting a little confused as to what I was initially thinking. I'll probably just save it as a test 001 and just save it as that. And then let's go back into this file, which was basic GH, which was my initial one that I was playing with. And maybe we'll just walk through and see what I was talking about there as well. So group, this was the sample I did before, kind of thinking about something worth playing with. Let's just go ahead and do a little color code. That's always tricky on me. And we'll take that into a little bit of a transparent. There we go. So what we had going on here is if we liven it all up and make it all enabled, you're going to see what we have, a similar type of exercise. You'll see all of these containers I didn't end up using, so I put those all. It was a similar walkthrough. This was a case of using number sliders, and you can see that it'll take different types of information as you go, so you can easily plug in a number slider with a the extracted base plane, which came out of the sphere. You can see the sphere, if I tuck in here, is right here. The cylinder was here. I threw a cap on it. Now, the one thing different with the cylinder was I went from the base plane, which was an XY plane, and I decided, well, why not turn that into a YZ plane? So I did rotate it like I did the other one, keeping track of the panel tool of what I'm seeing. I extracted the motion. I realized it was a Z motion, 0, 0, 10, so the way to have extract data, and put it in a container. Because quite honestly, if I go back here and say draw icons, you'll see that's basically the container. And now at this point, I would leave our names on, get you in the habit of leaving the display draw full names, and go over to icons and keep your fancy wires on. And this one's been deactivated, so I'll just enable that. Now you'll see these two single item lists move into a list item of a movement. You have control over each one. You can make them related to one another. And there's that single data to that other data. And the only thing we did different on our demo was we went in here and we grabbed our little graphed icon, grabbed the data and graphed it, then put it back into here, and we popped our items on each their own branch. And so that moved from 2 branches with 1 item on each, as opposed to what it was before, which was 1 branch with 2 items on each. We're going to get a little bit of data manipulation as we go. You've got a closed brep and you have an untrimmed surface. And just keep in mind, surfaces are good. Breps are a little better for coding and scripting. I've learned that from Jose Luis. And we're going to get real complicated with this series as we continue. It's 22 minutes to get you playing in Grasshopper and thinking differently. You've got all these wonderful geometries, pretty simple to start, but it's how I'm thinking when I'm working Grasshopper. I'm very rarely thinking about what I want to do in the end. I'm trying to control my data and understand it as I write a script towards an end. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Thanks very much for watching. And I'll just pop it back into all views so we can kind of see what was going on. Another thing in Windows is you can slam this to the side and you get a really nice condensed window that you can bring up. And it's a little slow to move that, but otherwise, there you go. Thanks again for watching. Wickerson Studios on Patreon will continue.